ever been near royalty? One? Sweet. Hey, by the way, congratulations on a new cape. I got to be, let's see, from here to the end of that table away from Queen Elizabeth one time. If you come to my office, you'll see a picture that I took myself of Her Majesty the Queen. I staked out a claim in 2005 when she came to the legislature out back. I was there early in the morning to make sure I had my spot up against the ropes so that I could be close to the royalty. But there was only one problem. Across from me was a girl in the wheelchair. I really made a mistake. Because guess what Her Majesty did? Do you think she wanted to talk to me? No, she went and talked to the poor little girl who was in the wheelchair. Because that's the kind of person Her Majesty was. She was a wonderful person. And it was interesting. Everyone had immense expectations of what the Queen would do, what she'd be like, how she would act. Everyone had their idea of what royalty would be. Some, when they think of royalty, they have an idea that's not very positive. I was watching a video of a fellow who's a mountain biker, and he was out mountain biking in the back parts of England. And along comes Prince Charles, at the time he was a prince still, and stops and talks to them. And they had a grand old talk and a good old time, and then off he went on his way again. He was just driving in one of the back roads. And the guy's comment was, you know, I want to hate royalty, but he's such a nice guy. I'm having trouble doing it. You know, sometimes we have negative views of royalty or those who are important. Sometimes we want to picture them as a bad person or a good person or someone to look up to, someone who can be perfect. One of the reasons why I look up to Her Majesty the Queen so much, God rest her, is that she actually took the time to care for people. You know what's one of the things that wasn't often commented on that she would do? She would go wherever she went and stop in the grocery store and look at the price of things. She would figure out what a price of bread, or the price of bread cost, or the price of milk, or all these things, and keep an eye on it. Because for her, she never had to worry once about what the cost of food was. She had people who bought the food, right? She had people to do all that. She never had to balance the budget and think, I wonder if we should buy milk or send the children to school today. She never had to worry about those things, but she knew that the people that she was supposed to rule did have to worry about those things. So she took the time to care. She was a great monarch, in my humble opinion. And this world loves people who are dramatic, people who are kings and princes and movie stars and celebrities and all these things, not so much because of who they are necessarily, but because of what they represent. They're someone that's important, someone that's a hero, someone that's a celebrity, someone that if you get close enough to, you might get some benefit from. You know, you can actually do this on your own. You can cause people to think that you're something special. I saw a hilarious little video from a guy. He put a little app on his phone that made it look like he was live streaming to 40,000 people, and all these people were paying attention to him. And then he would go around and show people that he was live streaming with all these people, and instantly this crowd would form, and everyone would want to be close to him, and girls were putting their arms around him because they wanted to be popular with him, and he created this huge stir, and soon people were taking selfies of themselves with this guy, and he was nobody. It was all a scam. But it didn't matter. When I was over in Serbia, I was sitting in a restaurant, and there was this guy that everybody kept coming up to and saying hello. And I said to my Serbian friends, is he like a movie star or something in Serbia? Is he a TV star or something? Because if he is, I want to go take a picture and say I have a picture with a Serbian celebrity. No, it turns out he was just the owner of the restaurant. But we see a crowd, we see a movement, we see somebody at the center of it, and we think, this person must be important. And we want to be near the important person, not because of who they are, but because of the perception around them. If they're important, maybe if I get close to them, I can be important too. It's a huge problem in our world, and it was a problem back in Jesus' day too. There was people that were looking for a celebrity of a certain kind. They were looking for a Messiah. They were excited for a king. They were dreaming of the one that would overthrow the Romans and would set them on their way. And so there was people that were following Jesus. And we come to Matthew 21, right at the beginning of verse 1. And we see Jesus drawing near to Jerusalem. He'd be on this grand 100-mile long progress. He'd walked with his disciples for 100 miles. It took a while. And as he walked, this crowd had come with him. These people had followed him because they knew that this man was the Messiah and that he was going down to Jerusalem to do something great. He was going to do all the things that they thought the Messiah would do. Kick out the Romans, take the crown and the throne of David. He was going to become someone in the present day. And so they were with him. And as they came to Bethpage, to the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 of his disciples. And he said to them, "Go into the village in front of you. And immediately you're going to find a donkey tied up with a colt beside her. Untie them, bring them to me. And if anyone says anything to you, simply say, 'The Lord needs them,' and he will send you on your way at once." So this took place to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet, saying, "Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden." So the disciples went, and they did as Jesus had directed. Here Jesus was in the midst of this great big crowd. And they all had expectations. Many were with him because of what they thought was going to happen. But Jesus hadn't come to be the kind of Messiah that they expected. Jesus hadn't come to do dramatic, amazing political things or to throw the Romans out on their ear. He wasn't going to walk up to Herod and challenge him to single combat for the throne of Jerusalem. He was coming to die. And he'd made it very clear the whole time. He'd said over and over to his disciples, "This is my purpose, that I should become the sacrifice for the sins of the world. I'm not coming to conquer something earthly, but I'm coming to conquer hell and death." But people are funny. People don't necessarily see who you truly are. Have you ever noticed that about people? People can't see inside you. Sometimes people don't even want to know who you are. They have an image, a picture, a desire to know who you are or to think who you are. And they will militantly bowl through on that no matter what the evidence is in front of you. And this was what was going on. People saw what they wanted to see. Even the disciples saw what they wanted to see. But in this moment, Jesus was once again proving that he was something different. Jesus, by simply his power as God, knew in a certain place, in a certain village, there was a donkey with a colt. Now that might seem kind of minor, but how many of you guys could tell me exactly where the livestock is on the farm that's just over there? Anybody? How many people can tell us what the pets next door are doing? Oh, come on, somebody's got to. I mean, we're smart. Where are your pets, Carnell?
Mine are my neighbors.
Yours? Are you sure? Can you see them right now? What if they've escaped? Do you think you know? We don't actually know these things, right? We can make good guesses, we can do all these things, but we don't know. But God actually knows everything. And here was Jesus who knew precisely that these things were going to be there. Now, that's pretty cool. But he did this to fulfill a prophecy that was made 550 years before. 550 years before, God had said, one of the things that's going to happen when the Messiah shows up is he's going to go riding a donkey into Jerusalem. 550 years. Now, let's play the prediction game. Do you guys ever do that at New Year's? We love to do that at New Year's. Go and write down some predictions for what are going to happen for the upcoming year. Sometimes you get some right. Sometimes you get some drastically wrong. Do you think that you could predict what's going to happen in 5 years? 10? 25? 550 years? I always love doing this, so I'm going to just do it with you guys. When these prophecies were made, Rome was nothing. One of the coolest prophecies is that Jesus was going to be hung upon a tree, that he was going to be crucified. When that prophecy was made, guess how many people used crucifixion as a method of execution? 0. Nobody did. The Romans were unique in their brutality. They created a whole new method of killing people that was slow and painful and awful. And when that prediction was made, when that prophecy was made, nobody did it. And in order for that prophecy to come true in Jerusalem, several empires had to rise and fall. Different people had to ebb and flow. Changes that couldn't even be imagined had to be made, right? When those prophecies were made, Babylon was the great enemy. By the time that this happened, by the time that Jesus was here, Babylon was nothing. When those prophecies were made, Rome was just a little city that had no real power anywhere. 550 years later, it was the great ruler of the world. Well, none of that could be predicted, right? We look now and who would you think is the greatest superpower in the world today? Depending on how you think, maybe you'd say the US or China, right? 100 years ago, who was the greatest superpower in the world? Britain, the United Kingdom. What are they now? Not really much, right? We can't even imagine what's going to happen in another 100 years. Maybe Ethiopia is going to become the great ruler of the world. We don't know, because things ebb and flow. At one time, Spain was the great empire of the world. And now, they're probably a good place to go on vacation, but they don't really have any influence. Things change. But God knows everything, because His plan and His purpose has been set. Not just since Zechariah prophesied, but it says He was the lamb slain before the foundation of the earth. Before any of this was even created. While God was still planning, this plan was set firm that Jesus would come. I love to tell people, Jesus is not plan B. God didn't go, oh no, those humans messed up. Quick, scramble, what are we going to do? Jesus, you're up. From the very foundation of the earth, it has always been God's purpose that this whole story of humanity would unfold just as it is. And part of that was this donkey. Now that's pretty minor, isn't it? Don't you think God would just spend His time prophesying the big things? You know, you're going to die on the cross. That's a pretty big prophecy. You're going to save people from their sin. That's a very important thing to know. But this tells us the level of detail that God knows about our lives. The little thing like, at a certain day, at a certain time, there's going to be a donkey tied up to next to somebody's house. Do you always park your car in the same spot? Some of us are creatures of habit and do. Can you guarantee in 550 years where your car is going to be parked? Probably not, if it even exists. And yet God had this kind of ability because He knows everything. This seems like such a minor thing, but this was Jesus showing His disciples exactly who He was, confirming yet again that His mission was the right mission, that He is God, that He was something more than just some political movement that was going to happen, that was going to overthrow the Romans, and then the next one was going to come in. The people of Israel were looking back to the Hasmoneans, to these guys that were in the time of a dude named Antiochus Epiphanes. What a good name. In the time of a ruler who'd taken over the land of Israel and was trying to force them to worship Greek gods, these Hasmoneans stood up and said, no, we're not going to do it. And they actually got up an armed rebellion and they kicked out all of these people who were trying to force them to do false things, and they created their own wonderful Israelite kingdom where they worshipped God. And so the people were looking and saying, yeah, now's the time. That's going to happen. And Jesus kept saying, guys, you're being stupid. That's not going to happen because I have something better and greater for you. But they wouldn't listen because they were determined to have the kind of king that they wanted. But He was coming not as a mere political leader, but as Lord, as the Son of David, as the one who was ready to do whatever it took to save the souls of humanity for all time. They were thinking this big, save us from our enemies today. And He was saying, eternally I'm going to save you from the enemy of humanity. Jesus showed Himself to the people, and it's still that way. It's not hard to see who He is. You go to the Scriptures, and you too can see who you have in Jesus. When you say, Jesus, your Lord, you can see what that means. He shows Himself to be Lord, Master, the one who knows the future, the one who has the plan, the one who's in control of your life, the one that you can trust no matter what. He shows Himself to be all that He's promised to be. But guess what we do nowadays? Same thing. That kind of God can be inconvenient because he doesn't fit with my idea of who God should be. So we start creating our own personal Jesus. You know, we chip off some of that wrath stuff and we get rid of some of that. You can't do your own thing and you have to do my thing. And we produce a Jesus that's kind of like a booster shot, or, you know, a little extra something in the octane in the gas tank. You know, he's going to help us through the difficult times. When we start bogging down, we can go to Jesus and pray and he'll give us that boost to get over the next hurdle. But the rest of the time, we can keep him on the shelf. And he can stay there, look really pretty. We'll talk to him every once in a while. But we can do our own thing and live our own lives. And Jesus says, that's not who I am. I'm not interested in being your part-time master. I'm not interested in a profit-sharing system where some days you're going to look after yourself and some days I am. He says, I want someone completely surrendered to me. I want your whole life. And if you try to hold on to your life, I promise, you're going to lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, then you will gain it. This is the deal that he gives to us. This is what he says to us. Sovereignty, the sovereignty of Jesus extends to every part of our life and the universe and everything. And we need to know and understand this deeply, because if we don't, we will limp in our walk with God. We will struggle in our understanding of even why we're here. If we're looking and we're saying, you know what, my purpose is just to be healthy, wealthy, and wise, and have nice hair, and then die, we're going to be lacking something. If we think our purpose is to do our own thing, then we're going to have problems, because we're going to be butting heads with the king all the time. Can you imagine? You have a king who has the power of life and death, and in comes one of his lowly servants from out of the field and says, listen here, kingy, I'm going to tell you how it's going to be. You're going to do this and this and this, because you've got all the power. So step to it, king. What do you think is going to happen to that servant? Might not go well. Thankfully, God is very long-suffering, slow to anger, and abounding in love, because we often do that to him, don't we? Now! Jesus, I've worked really hard for you today. I didn't sin for the last, 5 minutes, so you owe me. So here's what I want. I want this, this, and this, and you better make it quick, because if you don't, I might not believe in you. And he's sitting there going, oh no. The humans won't believe in me. I always laugh at that, like somehow we think that God's got, this deal where he needs our prayers or something to get strong, or he needs our belief. Like we could somehow go to him and make a bargain. God, if you really want me to believe in you, then you've got to toe my line. And he's going, yeah, but I'm God. I don't care. I want you to walk with me my way. Now, does he do that because he's a selfish jerk? Or he wants to make us suffer? No, his way is the way we were designed to live. You go outside today and you try to start your car without plugging it in. What happens? It makes a noise, but it might not work very well, right? Because those cars were not designed to function at this kind of cold. If you have any chance of getting it started, you've got to make sure you got your block heater on. You've got to make sure that somehow it's been warmed up, because an engine without oil, and when your oil is frozen, it doesn't have any, is an engine that lasts a very short period of time. This is what happens to us when we have the gall, the audacity to think that we can live life our way. God is standing there saying, no, you need every bit of what I have for your life to run the right way. And instead you're saying, you know what, let's just try cranking her over and see what will happen. That's what we do whenever we choose to go against him in any way. And it always ends badly. A few years ago, my brother tried this. It was a super cold day. He was just new driver, so don't blame him. He didn't know. And he turned on the car and then immediately got on the Anthony Henday in Edmonton and drove at 100 kilometers an hour. And all of a sudden, the transmission wasn't there anymore. It was all over the road. Because it turns out, when it's that cold and you just crank her up and run, it doesn't run. And this is how it is when we try to do things ourselves, when we think that we can have God on our own terms, when we can look at him and say, he's my idea of what God is. So Jesus was showing the crowd something, but they didn't want to see. Instead, they were actually really excited. They brought the donkey and the colt to him. They put their cloaks on the colt's back, and they sat him on it. Now, this is something pretty special. He walked for 100 miles. Why did he get on the colt of a donkey? Because he was making a point. He was coming to Jerusalem as a king. He was coming as the son of David. And so most of the crowd spread their cloaks on the road. Others cut branches from trees, spread them out. They made a carpet for him that he could walk without ever touching the ground. The crowd went before him and followed him, and they were shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest!" They were excited. They were excited for this king who was going to conquer, but already Jesus was showing who he was, because instead of grabbing a big fancy war horse, instead of coming in armor and with a sword, Jesus was coming riding on the colt of a donkey. He was coming purposely with an expression of peacefulness. He was coming as the great King of peace, not as a warrior who would do violence, but one who was humble and lowly. I mean, just imagine this picture. Here's King Charles. He's going to come and visit us, right? And around the corner, you're waiting for him, right? You're expecting a motorcade. I was in Ottawa and I saw Joe Biden's motorcade. It was like 75 cars. It was hilarious. It took 5 minutes to pass. I videoed it. It took 5 minutes for his whole motorcade to pass. So here comes King Charles. He's going to come to the church. And you're expecting the motorcade. You're looking for him. You're watching, and other cars are coming and going. And then all of a sudden, along comes this rattle-trap Ford Fiesta, right? Pulls into the parking lot, and out of that steps King Charles. Wouldn't you be a bit shocked? Because that's not the right thing for a king to ride in. It's got to be something big and dramatic. It's got to have presence. Well, this is what Jesus was doing to these people. He was saying, hey, I am not coming to do what you think I'm coming to do, but I'm coming to do something that you can't even imagine. The crowd was not going to be thrown off, though. This crowd had followed him all the way from Galilee because they were ready and expectant. They were knowing that, you know what, you might say whatever you want, you're just trying to test our faith. We know that you're coming to kick out the Romans. And so they went full into the whole thing. They laid their cloaks on the ground. Now, these cloaks are very special. We were just reading in Exodus that, you know, you could take a lot of stuff from a guy, but you weren't allowed to take his cloak because that's the thing that covered him. And they were taking off their cloaks, and they were laying these important garments down on the ground to show honor to this king, to make a red carpet that he could walk along. They were shouting and cheering, Hosanna! Here comes the Son of David! Here comes the king who's going to throw out the Romans! This Son of David, the Messiah, was so important for the Jews. It was this one guy who had the right bloodline, who had the right lineage, and who would do the job, who would wipe out the enemy. They believed in him, but they believed in their own way. They were excited because they were part of a political movement that would change the world, but they weren't excited for who Jesus actually was. Now, Jesus could have been smart here, right? I mean, anybody who's done anything in politics knows you got to get the people on your side. You have to get the people believing the right things. You have to move them in the right direction. And so sometimes you got to do some give and take. You know what? You have all these people here who are willing to follow you. Throw them a bone and be the kind of person that they want you to be. And then you're going to build the movement more. Think of all the good that Jesus could have done if he had just taken a little bit of political power. If he'd have just stepped up and been the kind of person that the people wanted him to be. He could have made huge waves in the world. He could have created the empire of peace. He could have done so much good. And the people would have been willing to go along if he'd have just done what they wanted. Thankfully, Jesus isn't a politician. Though they wanted something from him over and over again throughout his life, when they came saying, if only you'll do this, then I'll give you anything you want, Jesus made a point of saying, no, not happening. One of my favorite times is in John 6. Jesus feeds the 5,000 and then disappears. And these guys are so dedicated to following Jesus that even though he's disappeared, they search for him and they find him and they come to him saying, we're ready to follow you anywhere. Isn't that awesome? People are seeking Jesus and ready to follow him anywhere. And then they say, one condition, keep giving us bread. Keep giving us what we ask for. We want bread. Moses gave manna in the wilderness. It's the least you can do. I mean, here we are, following you. Come on, provide for us. And so Jesus says to them, if you want some bread, here's the deal. Eat my flesh. And they go, yeah, I don't think so. These are hard sayings. Who can listen to them? And many turned and walked away. And he looked at the disciples and he said, are you going to go too? And Peter said, where else can we go? Because you have the words of life. And we believe that you're the Son of God. We are following you not because of what you can give us, not because of the bread, not because of the provision, not because you're the kind of guy that seems to be the political answer to all our problems, but we're following you because you have the only thing that matters, life, and that abundantly. Now we have this same distinct danger in our walk, like I say. We think we know how Christ should work. We think we know what he should do. Not only do we look at him and we want our personal Jesus, but even when we recognize what kind of Jesus he is, then we look at his works and we say, okay, now I'm going to tell you how to do things, God. Some of them are very personal. We look at our families, and maybe our kids aren't walking as closely as we'd like to. We say, God, I know that it's your will that our kids should walk with you, so I want them to today. And I want them to right now. And if there's any problems with it, we're going to have a problem, God. Maybe we look at our extended family, other people that are close to us, and we say, God, I see problems going on here, and I want those problems ended now. And if you don't, I'm going to doubt you. I'm going to deny you. I'm going to question whether you really care. I'm going to wrestle with you because you're not doing things on my schedule. You're not doing things the way I want. I don't know if you really are in charge unless you can toe my line. And Jesus doesn't work that way. We look at him to transform the world around us, to fit our desires, to bring the kingdom here on earth. And we struggle when we don't see that. When we don't see things going the way we think God would want them to go. We doubt, we fear, we lose our trust. And Jesus is saying, I'm the king. Trust me. Leave it to me. I know you want me to come in on a war horse and kick all your enemies' butts, but I'm coming in on a donkey. I'm coming in my way, and let me tell you, my way is going to be permanent. It's going to be best. And incidentally, it is the only way. No matter how hard you try to twist God's arm, he's not going to give in. You know what the definition of magic is? It's thinking that we can do some sort of incantation, some sort of ritual, some sort of thing, and force God to do something in return. And even as Christians, we can fall into this trap. You know, I can look at God and I can say, my will is this, and so I'm going to pray hard enough. Or I'm going to work hard enough in the church. Or I'm going to be really, really good. And I'm going to expect that God then is going to do things my way. But what does the Bible say? You have not because you ask not. You have not because you ask it amiss to consume it of your lusts. You don't get it because you don't want God's will, you want it your way. Now sometimes the two can be the same, right? And that's why we pray boldly. But we pray in his will. And we trust that he always has the right way. And there's only two options. Either I'm going to get what I think is the best way, or there's something better. God's never going to look at us and say, I see that you want good, but instead I'm going to give you school. He doesn't do that. Sometimes it may feel like it. Sometimes we may be frustrated. Sometimes we may be hurting. Sometimes we may be left wanting to strangle somebody. But God's not doing it to punish us. God's not doing it to teach us a valuable lesson. God is giving us the best for us in every single situation. You know, if you like these multiverse theories that people have come up with, where there's, 100 million different universes, there is no such thing as a better universe, as a better life, as a better walk with God than the one that God's got you on. Because this is the one that is going to sanctify you. This is the one that's going to make you holy. This is the one that's going to leave you perfect. and presentable to God when you go before him at the end of your life. This is the one that has been tailor-made for you, that you might know God and glorify him. That's the point of life. He didn't come to be a lapdog, but to be a true and eternal king, to save and overcome the grave, and to make us into who we're supposed to be. So then they got to Jerusalem, and they encountered a whole different crowd. This crowd was there for the big Passover feast, for all of the lead up that was going to happen. This was about a week before Passover, and it was busy in Jerusalem. It was packed in Jerusalem, and the people were coming from all over, and they were excited to see someone coming, right? Just like that guy who managed to get all the people believing he was someone special. Everyone saw a crowd, and they said, "Hey, who's this? Who's at the center of the crowd?" And the crowds that were coming in said, "Well, this is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth of Galilee." Now, how do you think they responded to that news? Do you think they were excited and joyful? Well, we actually have an inkling of how Jerusalem responds to rumors of a king. Remember when the wise men came to Jerusalem and they said, "Hey, where's the king that was born?" Were they all like, "Wow, I don't know, let's find him"? No, they were stirred up, just like it says here. They were worried. They were like, "Oh no, the Romans are going to hear, and then bad things are going to happen." They were they were thrown off kilter. They were not excited by this because it was something unsettling. It was something scary. It was something that was going to upset the apple cart. Jerusalem was the home of all of the best and the brightest, all the greatest and the good, the ones that were content with the system the way it was, the ones who were getting along just fine. And when they heard of a king, all they could think of is problems, uncertainty, unsteadiness. And they weren't excited. They were a little bit scared because new kings caused problems, created uproar, agitated the Romans, threw off the religious balance. These were the kind of people who, when they went out to see Jerusalem, they said, "That's impressive. I see what you're doing. I assume it's Beelzebub that's doing it." These were the ones that continually chased after him and went, "What you're doing is wrong. Don't you know that your disciples should wash their hands? Don't you see that they're violating the Sabbath? Don't you see that everything you're doing is ruining the world?" And this is what can happen to us, too, when we encounter Jesus. He does throw things off. He does cause your whole world to go off kilter. He will shake things up. He will break things down. He will divide families even. He can cause your whole world to be turned on its head. Because now, instead of living the way you always have, everything root and branch fundamentally has to change. And it can be scary. If you ever want to have some fun, go down to the youth room. And Amelia has done some wonderful art there. I actually asked her to do a mural on the one wall. And if you look, it's a picture of a lion in a cage, and there's briars and thorns and brambles around the cage. And outside of the cage is a wonderful, beautiful Serengeti, all the things that a lion likes. But the lion that's in the cage can only see thorns, brambles, and problems. And so it's sitting there in the cage because it's afraid. Because from its point of view, from its perspective, all it sees is pain. And this is how it is when we encounter Jesus. It does seem scary to go with him. We can look and we can say, if I step out in trust and believe in you and walk your way, from where I'm standing, all I can see is uncertainty. All I can see is pain. God, you say I have to give up my children and trust you with them? But if I let go, they'll fall. I've been holding them up for so many years. God, you say I have to trust you with my work, with my life, with my country, with everything around me, but I've been doing my best to hold them together for so long, and we're just barely making it. I'm just barely keeping things alive. If I let it all go, it's going to come crashing down around me. And so we resist him. We fear him. We actually doubt that all that's good, that all that he's promised could possibly be true for us because we don't see it now. He promises freedom, but he says in order to get the freedom, you have to give up. We've been fighting for so long. It's pretty hard to give up. We end up wrestling with him and holding on to the pain and the sorrow and the suffering, rather than just trusting Him. Because that is unknown. It is scary. And the way I've been doing it now might not work really well, but it's awfully familiar.